On the morning of February 3, 2025, a school district in North Carolina issued a warning no parent expected to hear. A new online network was targeting children, not to scam them or bully them, but to coerce them into violence, exploitation, and self-harm. At the same time, federal agents in California were conducting a raid on a small suburban home. Inside, they found hundreds of disturbing files, multiple encrypted devices, and evidence linking the suspect to a shadowy group known only as 764. Across the country, dozens of similar investigations were already underway. And as the cases began to unfold, a terrifying truth came to light. 764 wasn't a traditional criminal organization. It was something far more unpredictable and far more dangerous. The group known as 764 has quickly become one of the most alarming online threats in recent years. Not because it's large, not because it's centralized, but because it has no leaders, no structure, and no clear purpose beyond inflicting suffering. According to the FBI, 764 began emerging around 2021, growing out of smaller underground communities focused on manipulation, sadism, and coercion. Its members operate across gaming chats, Discord servers, Instagram DMs, and anonymous messaging apps, anywhere they can find vulnerable or isolated minors. Authorities now classify 764 as a form of nihilistic violent extremism, or NVE. Unlike political extremist groups, 764 isn't motivated by ideology, money, or religion. Its only consistent theme is cruelty. The victims are often young teenagers searching for friendship or validation online. The perpetrators are scattered across the world, acting independently, but using similar tactics to manipulate and control their targets. And as investigators dug deeper into these cases, they discovered a chilling pattern, one that can be traced through multiple arrests across the United States. To understand why the FBI calls 764 a modern-day terrorism threat, we need to look at how the group actually operates and the disturbing cases behind it. 764 uses a cycle of recruitment, manipulation, and coercion that is shockingly effective and often invisible until it's too late. Members usually begin by approaching young victims in places where teens naturally socialize: multiplayer game lobbies, public Discord, or Roblox servers, mental health or support communities, TikTok comment sections, and Instagram group chats. These initial conversations often appear harmless. They might compliment the victim, ask about hobbies, or pretend to share similar struggles. Once trust is established, the member begins isolating the victim, encouraging them to hide the friendship, telling them their parents wouldn't understand, promising emotional support, or asking them to move from public chats to private DMs. This is where victims become dependent, believing they've found someone who truly listens. After gaining trust, the stranger begins introducing darker topics: self-harm, violence, explicit behavior, humiliation, and illegal content. They slowly test the victim's boundaries, pushing them into situations they would normally never consider. Once the victim complies with even one request, the coercion begins. Even a single compromising message, photo, or voice clip becomes leverage. Victims are threatened with exposure, doxing, humiliation, or harm, and many comply with escalating demands out of fear. One of the most disturbing aspects is that 764 members often share victims' content with each other. It becomes a form of currency within the group, encouraging more extreme behavior from newer recruits. Authorities say the structure is designed to be resilient, decentralized, and endlessly repeatable. In early 2025, federal prosecutors in Maryland indicted a man linked to 764 on multiple charges, including sexual exploitation of minors, coercion and enticement, cyberstalking, and production of illegal material. He used gaming platforms and Discord servers to approach victims as young as 12. Court records describe a months-long pattern where he posed as a teenager, earned the victim's trust, and then coerced them into increasingly dangerous behavior. When investigators arrested him, they uncovered evidence that he was part of an active 764 subgroup, a chat containing dozens of similar offenders who encouraged each other and shared techniques. This case alone involved more than 20 identified victims across multiple states. But prosecutors say this was only one fragment of a much larger network. In late 2024, FBI agents in Downey, California, executed a search warrant on a 22-year-old man believed to be connected to 764. Inside the home, investigators recovered multiple phones, several encrypted laptops, and extensive online activity logs. What they uncovered suggested long-term involvement in a coordinated online network. According to federal documents, the suspect had been contacting underage individuals through anonymous messaging apps and attempting to influence them in harmful ways. But what alarmed investigators most wasn't just the online material itself. It was the level of coordination behind it. They found that the suspect had been in regular communication with others across the country, sharing methods, exchanging information, and encouraging each other's behavior. Agents later described 764 as a violent nihilistic network, noting that its members seemed driven not by money or ideology, but by a desire to cause harm. Throughout 2024 and 2025, more than a dozen families across the Midwest reported nearly identical incidents. Their child met someone online. The conversation shifted to inappropriate topics. The child was manipulated into compromising situations. And then the threats began. Victims became terrified and withdrawn. Parents only realized the extent of the situation after noticing sudden isolation, panic attacks, or fear of going to school. Investigators traced multiple accounts back to individuals associated with 764. What stood out was the group's consistency. Different perpetrators, different states, but the same manipulation script. In early 2025, North Carolina issued a statewide bulletin alerting parents about 764. Authorities had identified several active cases involving victims as young as 11. Perpetrators posed as sympathetic teenagers, often claiming to struggle with depression or family issues. They built emotional connections, then coerced victims into harmful acts under the guise of trust or loyalty. When victims resisted, the threats escalated rapidly. Multiple children required intervention after experiencing self-harming thoughts, a direct result of manipulation by 764 members. According to state investigators, this network posed one of the most urgent threats they had encountered in years. 764 isn't organized like a typical criminal group. There is no leadership. Anyone can start a new cell or recruit new members. The group has global reach, with perpetrators scattered across multiple continents. New members adopt the same tactics even if they've never spoken to each other. When one subgroup is removed, another emerges elsewhere, and because victims often feel ashamed or afraid, countless cases go unreported. Authorities say this combination makes 764 more similar to a decentralized extremist network than a traditional exploitation ring. As of early 2025, the FBI has opened hundreds of investigations. Families across more than a dozen states have been warned. Law enforcement agencies are coordinating digital tracing efforts. Schools are issuing proactive alerts. And Congress is debating new penalties for cyber coercion. One official described 764 as a modern-day terrorism threat operating in children's bedrooms. 764 is not a traditional criminal organization. It has no leaders, no headquarters, no clear ideology, only victims. And as long as minors continue spending more time online, often alone, groups like 764 will continue to grow in the shadows. For now, the best defense is awareness. Because in these cases, The difference between safety and tragedy often comes down to recognizing the warning signs before it's too late.